So I'd just like to say good evening to everybody, and it's really lovely to have so many of you joining us for this webinar. So my name is Jane Wigan. I'm Events and Courses Officer at Sussex Wildlife Trust, and tonight I am joined by our Coastal Communities Officer, Ella Garrud, who is going to take us on a journey beneath the waves in Sussex. So just before I hand over to Ella, just a couple of housekeeping items. The presentation will last for about 45 minutes and there'll be a short Q&A session at the end, and we aim to finish promptly tonight at 7 p.m. Your cameras and microphones will be switched off for the duration. So if you do have a question for Ella, this can be typed in using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen at any point during the webinar. At the end of the talk, you will be automatically redirected to our donations page. These webinars are free, but if you would like to further support our work, we would welcome any donations. This session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to everyone once it is available. So, without further ado, I will hand you over to Ella. Thanks very much.
All right, first mistake, didn't unmute myself. Hopefully you can all now see and hear me. So yeah, thanks Jane for the introduction. As Jane said, my name is Ella and I'm the Coastal Communities Officer here at Sussex Wildlife Trust. And I'm going to take you on a little journey beneath the waves in Sussex today. So let's get started. There we go. So we're going to start off at our iconic chalk cliffs. That picture is obviously at Seven Sisters. And chalk kind of really is an iconic habitat in Sussex, what with our chalk grasslands, but also that extends into our marine and coastal environment. So with the chalk, it was built up gradually over millions of years, and it's formed from the skeletal remains of minute planktonic green algae called coccolithophores. These live floating in the upper levels of the ocean. Then when they died, their remains sank to the bottom of the ocean, combined with the remains of other creatures to form the chalk that shapes our cliffs today. And the downs were formed as layers of chalk were pushed upwards and gently folded into a huge dome shape by the same movement in the Earth's plates that formed the Alps. So there's a little map of all our chalk formations in the county and beyond. So yeah, you can see the sort of coastal and offshore chalk that we have. Hopefully you can see my mouse that is circling the Eastbourne to Brighton, the Sussex offshore reefs there. So our coastline is predominantly made up of shingle, and our shingle beaches exist thanks to the chalk. So shingle is mostly made up of flint, and flint is formed within chalk over millions of years by the accumulation of dissolved silica from animals such as sponges in the seabed sediment. So as the soft chalk forms, this silica fills the porous spaces such as ancient worm burrows, crab burrows, things like that. And then they harden into these irregular nodules. And then when the chalk has eroded over time, the flint nodules come free, and that has created our beaches. So as I said, shingle is common along the Sussex coastline, but it is rare internationally. So we're very lucky to have this habitat here. The majority of shingle is found in the UK, Japan, and New Zealand, and Sussex is home to 1/5 of all of England's shingle. So really, I should be calling it vegetated shingle. That's the name of the habitat. And it's a very difficult habitat in which to live because it's unstable, it's free draining, it's moving around all the time. So your kind of typical familiar sandy shore or rock pool associated species can't live in vegetated shingle. Animals can't burrow down, animals such as limpets and barnacles can't attach or live successfully. So organisms, that live here are very specially adapted. So we get vegetated shingle plants such as sea kale and sea holly, which are pictured in the left-hand photograph, which have adaptations such as growing in low mats to prevent water loss, forming extensive root systems to bind the shingle together and prevent it from collapsing, and having very thick, fleshy leaves, again, to prevent moisture loss. It's a really, really important habitat for many coastal bird species, such as the as terns and ring plovers, which you can see in this picture here. And they lay their eggs in the shingle. As you can see, they look really similar to the shingle pebbles. Yeah, that is a really, really important habitat, and we're very lucky to have so much of it here in Sussex. So moving on to our rocky shores. So again, this is all to do with our chalk. So we have chalk, there are our chalk cliffs again. And again, as the chalk cliffs are eroded over time, it creates these chalk wave cut platforms, which then create our rock pools. So chalk is a relatively soft rock. It's very easy for animals to create burrows inside the chalk. So it becomes a very complex 3D environment, which creates a very biodiverse habitat in which to live. So again, it's quite a difficult place to live, as with all rock pool kind of formations. Organisms have to be very specially adapted to cope with lots of extremes. So you can see that this exists in the intertidal zone, which is basically the area between high and low tide. So at high tide, it's completely covered with water. So they need to be obviously be able to live underwater. And then for about 6 hours at a time, they'll be exposed to the air. So they need to be able to survive potentially being left out of the water. And then with that comes extremes of temperature, salinity. So that's how much salt is in the water. And then of course you get very strong wave action on the coast, waves crashing onto the intertidal zone. So they need to be able to cope with that as well. But it's an incredibly exciting habitat. It's one of my favorite places to explore. It's relatively accessible for people to, be able to go out and actually see the animals that live there. Whereas, offshore, deeper underwater sites is obviously you have to be a qualified scuba diver really. So this is a fantastic habitat to explore. So I'm going to take you through some of the animals that we can find there. So we have different groups of animals. So I'm going to start with crustaceans. Any sort of obvious ones are crabs. So we have many species of crabs that live in our rock pools. These are some of our more common ones. You've got a spider crab there at the bottom, a brown crab at the top, which are a very important commercial species. So the adults will live further out to sea, but you do find juveniles living in the rock pools, also known as edible crabs, but I like to call them brown crabs because I don't think they should be defined by the fact that we eat them. Also, our crustaceans are barnacles. So these obviously look very different to crabs, but basically crustaceans are defined by the fact they have a hard segmented exoskeleton. So barnacles have a hard segmented exoskeleton, and essentially they don't move around. They have a planktonic phase where they're floating around in the water, and then once they get big enough, they will find a hard surface to settle on, and they will essentially glue their heads to the rocks and just live stuck to one place for the rest of their lives. So the little kind of kite-shaped thing in the middle is an operculum, and that opens up when they're covered with water, so they can put out their legs and feed from passing detritus in the water. And we move on to mollusks. So these are characterized by having soft bodies, often with a shell, and always with a muscular foot. So we have things like different species of sea snails. So you can see in that first picture, those are some limpets, and they are surrounded by barnacles, the crustaceans. And you can see the barnacles actually grow on the shells of other animals as well, which then actually does mean they can move around. So yeah, we've just got loads and loads of different species of sea snails. These ones are probably very familiar to anybody who's spent any time on our beaches. So those are the shells of slipper limpets, and these are actually an invasive species. They were brought over to this part of the UK, we think in the 1920s-ish, with a consignment of Pacific oysters for aquaculture. And yeah, they've just established here and are now, yeah, sort of, there's so many that we can't really do anything about it, unfortunately. And they outcompete native species for space and food. But yeah, you find thousands, millions of them on our beaches, the empty shells. But when they are in the water, they stack up like this. And that's a mating chain. The bottom animal is a large female, and then they mate in a chain. If the large female dies, the next one up, which is a male, will actually turn into a female, and to continue that mating chain. So they're super interesting, but unfortunately invasive. Other mollusks, so I said mostly they have a shell. That's not always the case. We have sea slugs, which are mollusks. They have a foot, but they don't have a shell. So we have, yeah, otherwise known as nudibranchs. You might have heard that term before, which means nude gills. It basically means their gills are exposed, not covered by a shell. And we have lots of really amazing species of these in Sussex waters. You know, some of these look like they should be in the tropical ocean with them being so bright, but yeah, we find them right here in Sussex. We also get cuttlefish, which are more closely related to squids and octopus. Cuttlefish are one of my favorite animals. They're really, really intelligent. They have loads of amazing adaptations, like being able to change the color and texture of their skin and to flash it to communicate to each other. They can expel ink to use as a mechanism to escape from predators. They're just, yeah, incredible animals, and we get them right here in Sussex. Going on to cnidarians, so these are animals that have radial symmetry. They're carnivores that have stinging cells in their tentacles. So examples of these are anemones. So we get a number of different species of anemones. So we have a beadlet anemone there, a snake lox at the top, and a strawberry anemone at the bottom. We also get animals called hydroids. So these are colonial animals. So each one of those sort of triangular things is a zooid, and that is like an individual animal that contains stinging cells, but then live in that colony. They don't live individually. So often people mistake them for seaweed when you see them as like a large colony, but they are actually animals. Very interesting creatures. And then, of course, we've got bony fish. The other kinds of fish we have are cartilaginous, which are the sharks, skates, and rays. But here we have examples of some bony fish. So these are species that we might find in rock pools. So here on the left is a common blenny, a tompot blenny at the top, which is a very iconic species with its tentacles here. Again, the adults will kind of live further out, but occasionally you can find smaller juveniles in the rock pools. And we have a goby here and a butterfish as well. So particularly the blennies are adapted to live in rock pool environments because they're covered in slime, which basically means they don't dry out if they're left out exposed to the elements when the tide is out. They can also change colour pretty quickly. So if you find one, I'm talking about the common blenny here, if you find one in, some green seaweeds, it could be pretty bright green. If you then pick it up and put it in a white bucket, it will very quickly turn very pale. So yeah, they've got some really incredible adaptations for, such a small fish. They also have very strong jaws, so just be careful when poking around in rock pools. I've never been bitten by one, but apparently it can hurt quite a lot. So yeah, those are our sort of rocky shore chalk rock pools. Moving on to some other habitats. So of course we have soft sediment habitats where worms and such can burrow in. Here you can see some worm casts on the bottom. We have sort of mixed sediment, mixed ground habitats as well, where you'll get seaweeds growing onto the hard surface. So this is a picture of, again, part of the chalk reef. So basically similar to the rock pools, but it's the chalk that's further out to sea. if you think back to that map we saw at the beginning, we saw some of those nodules out um, further into the sea, and that's kind of what it looks like. Get lots of growth, lots of seaweeds growing on there, and again, lots and lots of different creatures can live there because it's such a complex 3D habitat. We also get mussel beds, which is known as a type of biogenic reef. So basically, it's a habitat that's created by the fact that an animal has created it. So mussels, they're a type of mollusk. They're a bivalve. They have two shells with a hinge, and they grow together and form large reefs. And again, this is a really fantastic place for other animals to live. They become food for other animals and they create, again, this very 3D habitat where lots of different creatures can make their home. And then we also have kelp beds, which I'll come to and talk about more in more detail later. And of course, all those different habitats create homes for different animals. So again, we have bony fish. So these are both different species of wrasse, and they're very bright. They look similar to the nudibranchs. They look like potentially something that you find in warm tropical waters, but no, we find these here in our waters in Sussex. Other crustacean species like lobsters. We also get seahorses. So there's two species of seahorse that we get here in Sussex, the short-snouted seahorse, which is the one pictured, and the long-snouted seahorse. And then, as I mentioned, there are also cartilaginous fish, which is basically their skeletons are made of cartilage rather than bone. So basically the same material that's in our ears, their skeletons are made of this material, and it means they are more flexible and they don't have swim bladders. So bony fish have swim bladders that they use to control their buoyancy in the water. Cartilaginous fish don't have that, and their buoyancy, they just control it by swimming through the water, and their skeletons allow them to do that because they're not so heavy and made of bone. So yeah, that's a picture of a skate species, and then also we have a small spotted cat shark there as well. And just again, I've already talked about cuttlefish, but they're so great. It's actually quite rare to find them in rock pools. They're more likely to be out at sea, but there are signs of them in rock pools or even out on the beach. So I'm sure lots of you will have seen the picture in the corner there is its cuttlebone. So it's essentially the cuttlefish's internal shell, and it uses it for buoyancy in the water. Obviously, the rest of its body is very, very soft, and when it dies, it disintegrates very quickly or gets eaten by the animals, and then the cuttle bone will wash up onto the shoreline, and that's the evidence that we have that we have them out there. And then these are its eggs, so also known as sea grapes for fairly obvious reasons. They kind of look like a bunch of grapes, and they're black because they're covered in the cuttlefish's ink. Um, so if you ever do, if you're ever walking on the beach anywhere and you find some cuttlefish eggs, then, if they're not dried up and obviously dead, then do, if you can, safely put them back in the water because they could still be viable and could still hatch. And when they're close to hatching, they will actually start to turn transparent or translucent. Um, and you can see the tiny baby cuttlefish inside, which is pretty cool. And I've actually popped them in a bucket once and they have hatched in front of us, which was pretty amazing. Yeah. So moving on, of course, we do get marine mammals out in the English Channel. So here are two of the more common dolphin species. So we get bottlenose dolphin on the left. They're probably the ones you're more likely to see because they tend to come slightly closer into land. And then we also get common dolphins, but they tend to be a bit further out. They can be in quite large superpods. Probably not superpods in the English Channel, but you never know. But yeah, they tend to be further out to sea. We also get harbour porpoises and white-beaked dolphins as well, but a little bit less commonly. And we also do get whales occasionally swimming down the English Channel. So here is a video thanks to the Sussex Dolphin Project of a humpback whale that was spotted at sort of winter 24-25, December to January. There was a spate of sightings. I'm sure some of you were aware, or maybe even were lucky enough to see one yourself, of humpback whales in the English Channel. Not exactly sure how many. So the Sussex Dolphin Project report about 50 sightings during that time. Um, Not sure if that's unlikely to be 50 individual whales. We don't know for sure how many whales that actually was. Could have just been one. Um, but it will be interesting to find out. You kind of have to look at the underside of their tails to individually identify them, and most of the time the sightings were far off and unable to identify an individual whale. But here is a video. Hopefully this will play. Oh. So you can see its distinctive humped dorsal fin, which sits up sort of towards the back of its body, and the very distinctive blow as it breathes out. So that is a good sign to look for. You know, if you're out on the beach, up on a cliff on a clear day when the sea is calm, yeah, a telltale sign of a whale is that blow as they exhale before they dive. So yeah, I don't believe any have been sighted this year, although I could be incorrect. But who knows? We might see them at some point in the English Channel again. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. And other marine mammals that we get are seals. So we have two species of seals in the UK, and we get them both here in Sussex. So the one on the left is a grey seal. The one on the right is a common seal or a harbour seal. Same thing, different name. So the grey seal has a more sort of flat face. People say it looks a bit more dog-like, and then the harbour seal has a kind of cuter, people say looks slightly more cat-like, and that's kind of how you tell the difference. Again, always look out, you never know what you might see. So this is just at Holywell in Eastbourne, and if you can see that little dot there, that actually is a seal. Obviously you can tell a little bit more on a moving image on a video or with your own eyes because it'll be moving. But yeah, like I say, I've seen many seals up and down the Sussex coast, so always keep your eyes out. You never know what you might see. So that was a sort of very quick overview of the different habitats that we get here in Sussex and the different animals that live there. But how do we protect them? So we have a network of marine protected areas. So this particular map shows our marine conservation zones. So those are the ones numbered 1 to 9. We have, yeah, as I say, 9 of them. And each of them have sort of different laws in place that restrict certain activities within the boundaries of those areas to protect special features and species that are found within those sites. And then the lighter blue one is a fairly new addition. So that is actually a highly protected marine area where absolutely no damaging activities can happen at all. So there's only 3 in the UK. Hopefully more will be added at some point down the line. But yeah, we're very lucky to have an HPMA in Sussex. And I'm going to talk about a different kind of area of protection as well. But firstly, I'll need to talk about the context of it. So here we are back to our kelp forest, which I mentioned earlier on. So first of all, what is kelp? It's a group of large brown seaweeds that when they grow together, they form dense underwater forests known as kelp forests. And these habitats provide lots of ecosystem benefits. They protect our coast from erosion because they dampen wave energy, and they create a highly biodiverse habitat where lots of animals live. So we have seals will be found around kelp beds because lots of animals make their home there, as I said. So it's a great nursery ground for many different species, such as lobsters and small spotted cat sharks and those cuttlefish again. And obviously, so they will come and lay their eggs there. It's a very protected area from predators. If you imagine you're out in the open ocean versus being covered by this canopy of kelp is a much more safe area for their young to sort of develop before they make their way out. And that obviously, and then in turn attracts predators. Um, excuse me. So yeah, it creates this very biodiverse habitat. So in Sussex, back in the 1980s and earlier, we had quite dense kelp forests from around Selsey to Shoreham area. And then, unfortunately, due to a number of different factors, we lost a lot of that kelp. So what happened was the massive storms in the late 80s ripped out a lot of the kelp, which opened up that area to a fishing method called trawling. Oh yeah, what happened was, yeah, after the 1987 storms, lots of the kelp was ripped out in one go. So naturally kelp does die back in a sort of cyclical way, but it can regenerate and grows back. But what happened, because that area was completely decimated from the storms, it opened up that area to trawling. Before, the kelp was too dense for the trawlers to get in there. But without the kelp there, obviously they could come in, and as you saw in the video, those huge nets just come and scrape along the bottom, which basically stopped the kelp from recovering on its own. Just as an aside, that film, if you've not seen it, Ocean with David Attenborough, is an incredibly powerful film, and I would encourage everybody to watch it. I believe it's on Disney Plus, I'm not sure, but you'll be able to find it somewhere online. Yeah, so back to Sussex. So yeah, after those storms and the trawlers came in, basically we lost about 96% of our kelp. There's very small fragments of it left in this area. So what happened was an organisation called the Sussex IFCA, which is the Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, decided, this is not good, and we need to create a new bylaw to protect that area from that fishing method. So they created a consultation to bring that protection in, and to help to get that across the line. A number of organisations came together, including Sussex Wildlife Trust, and created the Help Our Kelp campaign. And a filmmaker from a company called Big Wave Productions managed to snag David Attenborough to voice a campaign video, of which I have a very short clip here.
These underwater forests are among the most productive places on Earth, supporting a huge range of marine life.
So the campaign video is much longer, but yes, basically these organisations came together and created this campaign to get public support to push this bylaw into becoming reality. Normally, when the IFCA has a consultation open, you'll get a handful of people responding, often, obviously, fishers. But because of the campaign and the fact that we got David Attenborough to narrate the video, we actually got over 2,000 people to respond in support of getting this protection in. And after, quite a while of campaigning, a few years, it did actually become
These
law.
underwater forests.
Sorry, let's move that on. And so yeah, the bylaw came into place in 2021. So you can see this hatched red area is basically an area now where trawling is not allowed to take place. So the thicker area here is obviously where the kind of historic dense kelp beds were, but it does extend the whole of the Sussex coastline, which is excellent. And from the inception of that bylaw, the Sussex Kelp Recovery Project was created. So it's the UK's largest rewilding project. 300 kilometres square is the area, which is the area that the bylaw covers. It's an ambitious and pioneering nature-based solution to restore our coastal ecosystems for biodiversity, communities, and climate. So it's a massive partnership project that we are involved with, along with all those organisations you can see there on the screen. It's part of key national, regional, and international networks and efforts to improve ecosystem health. So, as I said, it's a huge project with lots of different research going on. So we're now actually nearly 5 years on from protection, and the focus of the project is understanding what happens when we remove human impacts from marine ecosystems to provide a case study for how those ecosystems can recover if we allow them, and the benefits that other areas may see from doing kind of the same thing. So the project is all about pressure removal to help kelp habitat and obviously other important marine habitats in the area to recover. So the project has lots of different research going on. This is an infographic kind of summing up all the different things that are happening. I won't go into every single one because that would take me days. But there's all sorts of surveys to establish whether, for example, crabs and lobsters numbers are coming back with potting surveys. We've got genetic assessments of kelp. We have dive surveys with volunteers, eDNA analysis, which basically allows you get a sample of water from the water column. It gets tested and it tells you all the different species that were in the water within a certain window by picking up different DNA markers such as scales that have been left behind by fish, for example. So yes, there's lots and lots going on. And I've got another little video here as well to give you kind of an idea of what we're seeing change since that bylaw has been in place. Yeah, so obviously, that video needs slightly updating because it did say 4 years of recovery. It's actually been nearly 5 now, as I mentioned. So yeah, that gives a nice little sort of window under the waves of what we're seeing sort of slowly start to recover because that trawling is now removed. So as part of the project, they have developed a kelp recording scheme. So this is for anybody to get involved with. If that QR code there, if you're quick with your phones now, you can scan that and it will take you to a web page which shows you how to get involved. But we'll also be sending out links at the end of this, so don't worry if you don't have a chance just now. But the recording scheme is for anybody who's out on the coast, any kind of water users, snorkelers, divers, beach walkers, dog walkers, whatever. If you're out on the coast and you see kelp washed up or still alive and attached, then you can submit it to the recording scheme, and this will help us create a picture of what species of kelp are coming back and where. So online, there's lots of resources to help you work out what species you have found. But if you don't know, that's fine. You would be uploading a photograph anyway, and people on the other side from the project will identify it for you. So it's a really fantastic way to get involved. and it's an example of a citizen science project. So citizen science is research conducted by with participation from members of the public. You don't need to be a trained scientist, it's for anybody to get involved. Has so many benefits, such as expanding the capacity for data collection, public engagement and understanding of the natural world, and obviously then improved environmental outcomes as well, that's reached through the gathering of the data. We have a number of different citizen science projects as well as the Kelp Recording Scheme. So we are the Sussex coordinators for Sea Search. So this is for qualified scuba divers to go out and survey species and habitats within our Sussex ocean. So I'll be sending out links at the end. If you are a scuba diver and want to get involved, you have to do a course called the Observer course, which teaches you how to record what you're seeing. But it's a really fantastic way to get involved again if you are a qualified diver. For those of us who aren't, we also have Shore Search, which is a Wildlife Trust-wide citizen science programme, but that basically all the wildlife trusts who have a coastline run, and it's monitoring our intertidal zone species and habitat. So all those rockpool creatures that I spoke about at the beginning, those and obviously far more as well. So the data from this project is inputted into a big national database and is then there to be used to aid in the management of marine conservation zones, for example. So the data is all very important, which is, why we do it, and also connecting people, volunteers with their local coastline as well. We also run beach litter surveys. So these are beach cleans, but with the added extra of collecting data on what rubbish we are removing from the coast. So you can see in that top left picture is a survey sheet. And yeah, we basically note down every single thing that we find within a 100-meter stretch so that it's a quantified survey method. And here's just an example of, I think this was actually from the 2024 survey season. So those numbers are individual pieces of litter in those separate categories. And obviously here's a pie chart that breaks down the percentage. So you can see 76% of the materials we collected was plastic in that year, which is, I'm sure, again, if you've been to the beach, is not that surprising because most of the litter that you see is sadly plastic, which causes a lot of problems because it doesn't break down. Animals mistake it for food and eat it, which causes them to choke potentially, or block their digestive tracts and kill them that way, or getting tangled up in plastic and then drowning in the sea as well. So there's lots of hazards due to plastic pollution in the ocean and on our beaches. So as an example of the importance of collecting that data, last year a ban came in on disposable vapes. So it's estimated that before the ban, 5 million single-use vapes were being thrown away in the UK every single week, which is just a staggering amount. And obviously they're made up of plastic, they've got batteries in there, they've got all sorts of materials that are just being thrown away after use. Makes them very difficult to recycle because of all those different materials. They're hard to separate. They've got the lithium-ion batteries in there, which are hazardous because they can cause fire if they're crushed or punctured. All around bad news, basically. So yeah, the disposable vape ban came into effect on June the 1st in 2025 in England and Scotland. So that's excellent news. And then the data that we record is part of the Marine Conservation Society method called Beach Watch. And so, yeah, all the data we collect goes into that big national database. An example of that, really being worthwhile is that plastic bags, since the charge was brought in for plastic bags, which came in 2014 in England, plastic bags being reported found on beaches as part of those surveys have gone down by 80%. which is obviously incredible news. And that was not even banning plastic bags from shops. It was just a simple charge, and that has meant that 80% reduction in finding plastic bags on our beaches, which is obviously incredible. So it just shows that data collection, obviously removing litter off the beach is really important, but the collection of the data to show evidence of what is harming our environment is extra important, because that's how we can make change. So another citizen science project that we promote is to record these, which hopefully you recognise. So these are the egg cases from sharks and skates. The one in the bottom left here is a small spotted cat shark egg case, and these are from various species of skates. So yeah, here are some pictures of the animals that lay them. I've talked about them before. They're the cartilaginous species of fish. And so the organisation that runs that is called the Shark Trust, and they have the Great Egg Case Hunt. So again, if you Google that, they have an app which makes it really, really easy for you to upload pictures and the location of where you found the egg cases, and helps you identify them. And then obviously that contributes to, again, a massive data set and helps us to learn more about what species we find where across the UK. So work that we do at Sussex Wildlife Trust to get people involved with citizen science and to change their behaviour, to clean the beach, that kind of thing. We do lots of community engagement work, sort of, you know, through increasing people's ocean literacy, their understanding of the ocean, and through community empowerment. So we do this through a number of different ways, such as introductory activities for groups who sort of, you know, have little to no knowledge about the marine and coastal environment, letting them see what's out there, such as activities like intro to rock pooling and species ID, beach cleans, and film screenings. So we put on a number of film screenings of the ocean with David Attenborough film to try and get as many people as possible to watch that film and understand the damaging impacts of various fishing methods. We also run things like workshops and training programs. A good example of that, we have a new scheme called a Wilder Community Training. So we have a campaigner training program, which is designed to give people the skills and confidence to push for change and protect their local green and blue spaces across Sussex. So as part of that, we provide advice and training so that people can develop sort of the most effective campaigns and techniques to take action for nature. Again, I'll put a link in the follow-up email to that so you can learn more. We run Wild Beach training. So this is training for education practitioners to become wild beach leaders. So Wild Beach, if you've never heard of it, is basically taking forest school to the beach. So it's all about experiential, child-centered, practical learning, and connecting children to their local coastline. So it's a week-long course, and it's a really, fantastic hands-on training, which then allows teachers to take children to the beach, and you know, getting that next generation excited about learning about and protecting their local coastline through various different activities. We obviously as well work a lot on marine policy and advocacy. So this is things like responding to consultations such as Rampion Wind Farm extension. We've also been sitting on expert topic groups to try and make sure that development is as non-disruptive as possible. And obviously also working on getting new protected areas designated, such as the highly protected marine area that I mentioned earlier. This is a map of that site called Dolphin Head, and advocating for protection against various damaging practices such as the nearshore trawling bylaw that we talked about earlier. A good example of some recent work we have done, successful work, is the Brighton Marina dredging license issue. Some of you may be aware of this already, but basically an overview of the problem was that Brighton Marina have to dredge the entryway to the marina to allow boats to be able to come in and out. We don't have a problem with that. That's not what we were trying to stop, but they were dumping legally, they were licensed to do this, dumping the dredged sediment into the neighbouring marine conservation zone, and that's what we wanted to stop. It'd been going on before this area was designated as a protected area, but now the license came up for renewal last year, and we obviously wanted this to stop happening for various reasons. It's very damaging to the marine environment. So just a map to show you where this is happening. So we've got Brighton Marina here. They dredge their entryway, and then the spoil from that dredge is dumped in this red area. That's where they're licensed to do it. And this blue shading here is the Beachy Head West Marine Conservation Zone. So if we go back to the map that I showed you earlier, that is, if you see that red triangle, that's kind of roughly where it's been taking place. So it shouldn't be happening in a protected area, full stop. Those areas are protected for a reason. There's special habitats and species found there. The habitat is very sensitive, which is the chalk reef, which we've talked about. Lots of different animals live there, and the sediment can block their burrows and fill their gills with toxic sediment. It's just all round not good. As I say, yeah, issues with sedimentation, filling up the burrows, and issues with pollutants. If you can imagine lots of boats coming in and out, there's going to be toxins within that sediment. And we also had issues with their monitoring. We don't think that the monitoring they were doing was good enough at a high enough level to prove that it wasn't actually causing any damage. So here is an infographic just about the problem. I won't go into all of these points, but yeah, this was part of our campaign. So yeah, what happened? I'll skip over this, but basically the renewal for the license came up in 2024, and we campaigned to get it stopped. So we got lots of people to respond to the consultation against renewing the license. We held a protest at Brighton Marina, and unfortunately, the organisation that grants licenses for this type of activity is called the MMO, so the Marine Monitoring Organisation. And unfortunately, they allowed the license, they renewed the license for 10 years, which obviously we were not happy about at all. So what we did was launched a judicial review to counter the decision. Luckily, it never went to court because the MMO conceded and revoked the license. So we don't know what's going to happen next, because the marina probably is going to resubmit an application. They need to dredge, but we just don't want it to happen in that marine protected area. So yeah, why does it matter? Protected areas should be protected. Public bodies such as the MMO should be making evidence-based decisions. It sets a dangerous precedent for all other MCZs around the UK. You know, if a damaging activity is allowed to happen here, then what's to say it won't? Similar things could happen elsewhere. We've had huge public support and interest in this, so thank you for anybody who has responded to the consultation or donated to the legal fund. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's kind of an example of one of the recent pieces of work we've worked on in the sort of policy realm. I think that was my last slide. So how to get involved, really simple things like leaving the beach and ocean cleaner than you found it, making a sustainable swap for the sea, join a citizen science project, which I've mentioned today, become a wilder community champion, and simply just help us celebrate and share our amazing marine life. I think there's a lot of perception still, even with people who live on the coast, that there's not much out there. It's a grey, empty place, which I hope I have shown in this presentation is absolutely not the case. There's huge amounts of life out there, fascinating, colourful, social, just incredible animals and organisms that live out there. And yeah, they need to be shouted about because our seas are amazing. I think I have one last video to show you. So this was taken during a kelp monitoring research trip. And then we have kelp. Some fabulous bottlenose dolphins swam past, which I can imagine was very exciting. Oh, sorry, there we go. I'll keep playing the same videos. So yeah, thank you very much. Follow us on social media if you want to get in touch about anything that I've talked about here. That is our marine team email address, which will come through to me and other marine colleagues. And I think hopefully we'll have a little bit of time, 7 minutes, to answer some questions. Right. Hopefully Jane will pop back up now.
I'm here.
Oh, good.
Fantastic, Ella.
Should I stop sharing my screen?
If you want to, and then
Okay. There we go.
brilliant. Well, thank you. That was a great overview. I hopefully given everybody an idea of exactly the projects that we're involved in. We've got a couple of questions. So the first one you may have sort of touched upon later on in the presentation, but it says, great news about the area designated as an additional level of protection. How or why did the HMPA area get designated?
Great question. So basically, initially there was a report written by a group of people who got together as part of a government commission and recommended that we have a network of these highly protected marine areas because of targets that we need to protect 30% of the sea by 2030. So this was a way to help reach that goal. And that report recommended that we should have a pilot of 5 sites minimum. The government then decided, okay, let's do 3. And luckily, Sussex was one of them, as I said. So the reasons that that particular area was designated was for things like it has Ross worm reefs, which are biogenic reefs. As I mentioned, mussel beds are a biogenic reef. So these are reefs made by a particular type of worm that kind of creates these very delicate, almost paper-like reefs that are made up of their tubes, and when built together it makes these big areas, and as you can imagine it's very sensitive to any sort of disturbance. So that's one of the reasons. It was also deemed to be an area important for marine mammals and seabird feeding as well. Those are the things I can remember off the top of my head. We have written blogs about it, which will be online. If you want to have a search for that, then there'll be more detail as to why that area was chosen.
Thanks, Ella. That's great. The next question is sort of querying the areas that we work in. And it says, I live just outside Worthing in West Sussex and find there's less focus by organisations like yourselves in our area, and the focus is on East Sussex. Is this just my impression?
I think we do, but obviously it's a long coastline. So we do try and spread ourselves along. It's interesting because I've had people from East Sussex say, oh, everything seems to happen in the west of Sussex. Obviously with the kelp recovery project, that area where the main bit of the bylaw is in West Sussex. So it's from as I mentioned, Selsey to Shoreham sort of area. So actually a lot of research is going on in that area off the coast of Worthing. We have also the Kingmere Marine Conservation Zone, which is just off the coast of Worthing as well. But yes, we try and spread ourselves across the whole area as much as we can. Yeah.
Great. The next one, which I know we can respond to, perhaps with another link, is what is an example of a sustainable swap for the sea?
That's a really good question. So in the follow-up email, I'm going to send you a link to a leaflet that we've put together all about it's 10 simple things you can do to help the ocean. And there's a couple of really good examples in there about what you can do, but I can say some now. So things like switching from certain if you eat fish, switching from certain fish species. So there's sort of a big five that you should avoid, which are, if I can remember them all, salmon, prawns. Oh no, I'm going to forget them all. Anyway, there's five of them, which we recommend that you avoid. And then the information on the leaflet also gives you information to find better swaps. Basically, the fish and that those big five fish are either caught in unsustainable ways or are from populations that are declining, so shouldn't really be caught and eaten, or from things like salmon farming is really, really detrimental to the environment. So that's why we recommend not eating salmon, because most of the salmon that we find in our supermarkets are from salmon farms. There's huge amounts of damaging environmental impacts from salmon farming. Other sustainable swaps, just simple things like not buying single-use plastic in like water bottles. Get a reusable water bottle so you're not buying one every time you want a drink. Things like switching from toxic cleaning chemicals like bleach, which obviously then it goes into the drains and eventually reaches the ocean. There's loads of environmentally friendly swaps out there. And it doesn't have to be more expensive either. I use bicarbonate of soda in a lot of my cleaning, and that's really cheap. You just get it from I just get it from my local hardware store. It's less than £2 and you can make loads of stuff out of it. So I would recommend that. So we've just got to think about what's going down our drains, what we're eating. Every small action you can do can help. And yeah, that infographic leaflet that we'll put a link to has loads of really good ideas of what you could do.
Fantastic, thank you. I think we've got time for one more question, and then I think what we'll do, because there's a few other questions that come in, we can look at them together, Ella, and perhaps put some answers into the email that we send out with the recording. How enforceable is the kelp rewilding bylaw?
So yeah, it's enforceable. So the Sussex IFCA, who I mentioned, created the bylaw. They police that area. So there is somewhere on their website, if you think you've seen a trawler in that area, you can report it and they will follow it up. So they have a vessel which goes out regularly, which checks on all sorts of things. They will board fishing boats to make sure that they are abiding by all the different rules that are in place, such as catch limits and making sure they're not taking out crabs and lobsters that are too small before they've had a chance to reproduce, all that kind of thing. So yeah, it's the Sussex IFCA who enforce that particular bylaw and many others in the area as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And we're at 7 o'clock on the dot. So yes, just like to say thank you again, Ella, for giving us that wonderful overview and those lovely pictures of all the creatures under the sea. I'm always amazed at how colourful the wildlife is in the seas around off the Sussex coast.